Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes as a few more people join here. We'll get started right at the top of the hour. So everyone just settle in, and while we're waiting, pull up the chat window, and I'll watch for the chat. We can interact if there's any questions as we're going through. While you're doing that, why don't you shoot a note in the chat? Tell me where you're calling in from and what type of projects you're working on. Okay, so let me get a screen share going here. That's the one there. And we'll get started in just a minute here. I guess today is Groundhog Day. I'm not sure if where you're calling in from, you do Groundhog Day. I've never been a great fan of Groundhog Day. It usually gets it wrong here in Canada. We end up having a long, cold spring at -40. So I guess we'll see what the groundhog says today, but it doesn't really mean too much around here. Hello, Turkey. Glad to have you here. Everyone else, if you're just joining, pull up the chat window there and let me know where you're calling in from. And we'll get started in just a minute. Okay, we're here right at the top of the hour, so let's get started. Hopefully everyone can see my screen that's being shared. Now, today's discussion is going to be on commissioning project management using the top-rated commissioning software and the industry-best CSU processes. So you're going to get the #1 commissioning project management framework that you can use to manage your commissioning workflows. And like I said earlier, this is meant to be interactive. So pull up the chat, Marlon, Nicholas, Ed, you've got it all up there. That's good. If you have any questions as we're going through the material, shoot your question in the chat window and I'll get your question answered. I'll also have a Q&A at the end of the discussion. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them during the presentation or at the end during the Q&A, and we'll make sure we get all your commissioning questions answered. Now, I've used the commissioning project management frameworks that we're going to discuss today on several different projects. I've used these commissioning project management frameworks in the power industry, building hydroelectric generation facilities up north. I've worked on transmission projects, particularly HVDC transmission. I've used these same frameworks in the aerospace industry, building satellites and rockets for the Canadian Space Agency. And I've also used these commissioning project management frameworks in the water treatment plant industry, where we were expanding and upgrading facilities not too far away from here. I'm also on the organizing committee for the Commissioning Professional Society, where we hold an annual event and get all the best and brightest commissioning minds in one room. We talk about the challenges that are being faced in the industry and how to elevate the importance of commissioning on projects. So it's a good event and you should consider checking it out. Now, I'm not the only one getting results with this approach to commissioning that we're going to go through here today. We've helped several others get these same results on projects. For example, Sheldon or Jonald or Kale and many others, once they complete working with us, they all tell me the same thing, that this was an eye-opener. They had no idea of everything that was required for commissioning. They tell me that this was the first commissioning explanation they found that fully matches with what really happens at site. And that's because it is. It's based on real-world experience. This isn't theoretical stuff from a book. This is practical knowledge to actually get the work done. They all tell me that they were unaware of the importance of each phase of commissioning and the stages to go through to properly plan for commissioning. And you can go to our website, go to commissioningandstartup.com. At the top, you can click success stories and you can read all the amazing success stories that people are having with our products and services here, and you can see what they're saying about the help that we're giving them. So I know these processes and tools are great stuff and they're helping a lot of people, and they can definitely help you and your projects too. So just to be clear though, this is not technical commissioning. This is not electrical high pot testing. If you're looking for specific technical details, if you're looking for ASHRAE or NEBB building commissioning, if you're looking for HVAC test and balance, that's not what this is. If you're here looking for MEP commissioning or the specific flushing standards for food grade piping, you're not going to get any of that here. That's not what this presentation is about. But technical commissioning is not actually what's missing on projects, though, is it? There's a lot of smart people working on projects, and they'll get the testing completed one way or the other. What's missing on projects are the structure that's supposed to go around the technical commissioning. What's missing are the processes and tools much earlier in projects to make commissioning more efficient. So let's look at a simple org chart. There's obviously three main functions on a project, right? We need to get it designed by all the design engineers. We need to get it built during construction, and we need to get everything tested at the end during commissioning. Or if you've got an EPC contract and design and construction are part of the same group, then this still all applies as well. There is typically someone to manage the design. There's always a design manager, and they're following design best practices. There's always someone to manage construction. There's an entire industry dedicated to construction project management. But where are the project management tools and processes to manage commissioning? On a lot of projects, they don't even exist. There is a gap in the industry for sure, and commissioning is left to the end for people to scramble and figure out later is often the case, right? Often using outdated paper and spreadsheet processes to try and track everything. So what do you think happens when the last part of your project, the most complex part, when everything has to start working together as one functional system? What do you think happens when there's no software tools or no structured process to ensure everything comes together at the end during commissioning? There is a gap in the industry, and the last 20% of projects often goes unmanaged. And when this happens, it's no wonder that projects are late and over budget when project teams have no system to finish projects, and no, your spreadsheets to manually track everything are not a system to finish projects, even though that's what a lot of projects do. This is the gap that we help you fill. This presentation is for project teams that need a structured system to finish projects during commissioning and want to upgrade from outdated paper and spreadsheet processes so that we can all, of course, complete commissioning as efficiently as possible and save time and money on our projects. Without a system to complete commissioning, when commissioning is left to the end, or when paper and spreadsheets are used for tracking, projects are just gambling. They have no way to control the end of their projects during commissioning. It's the Wild West. All you can do is roll the dice and hope for the best at the end. It's crapshoot. So let's fix that. I'm going to show you how, with the processes to follow and the software tools to use to successfully complete projects. And at the end of this presentation, if you want some more help, I'll show you how, with the consulting and training services that we offer, to give projects the best chance of success. So if this all sounds interesting, then I'm glad you're here. So hello in the chat. Hello, Lim. Hello, Kieran. Glad to have you here. All right. So I want to share some statistics with you that are quite concerning. This is Professor Bent Flibberg. He's from the University of Oxford, and he's compiled a database of over 16,000 projects from the last several decades. He's also written a book. It's called How Big Things Get Done. And if you haven't read it, it's an excellent book. You should check it out. Professor Flibberg's research shows that only 8.5% of projects are on time and on budget. That means over 90% of projects are late and over budget. That's terrible. The construction industry definitely has a terrible track record, and we need to improve that. Now, the complexity of completing projects during commissioning is one of the main contributing factors to delays when there are no systems and controls for commissioning. A lot of projects are still using paper and spreadsheets for commissioning, and these outdated methods just no longer work. I'm going to show you how to structure your commissioning for success so we can beat these odds and have more projects succeed. So let me know in the chat. Are you familiar with these statistics? How have your projects typically turned out? Which side of the statistics have they been on? Have your projects been on time and on budget, or do they fall into these statistics where 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget? Let me know your experience in the chat in how your projects have been ending during commissioning and which side of those statistics you're more familiar with. Now, to be clear, there are lots of challenges in the construction industry, and a good book to check out is called Built to Fail by Todd LaBelle. It's actually a brand new book. It only came out a couple of weeks ago, and I recently read it and it was fantastic. Mr. LaBelle talks about all the things wrong with the current approach to design and construction, and he also talks about what's required to actually fix the processes on projects to help design and construction with more of a production mindset. So definitely check out the book to learn about some of the challenges that are taking place in design and construction phases. But just because the other phases of projects are messed up doesn't mean that we should ignore commissioning. As described in the book, there are lots of industry experts that are working to fix some of these earlier phases of projects. What we've focused on is helping you succeed with commissioning so all groups on projects can work together. Design groups, construction groups, commissioning groups can all achieve success on our projects to help projects finish on time and on budget. So when I do this presentation, the first thing a lot of people want to know is just tell me what to do. Just give me the checklist to follow, or just tell me the software to use. I need to know how to commission a combustion gas turbine. Can you give me the 6-page document that tells me how to do that? Or just tell me which software to use, and I'll go get it, and that'll fix everything, right? And when I hear these questions, I already know that these projects are in a lot of trouble because there's a little bit more to it than that. You're never going to find a single document that shows you the steps for commissioning, and you're not going to find that magic software that tells you how to commission your project because each project is different and each project is unique. And you need specific processes and tools applied to your specific commissioning circumstances. So first, let's address the problems of what not to do for commissioning before we talk about what to do. Projects are having problems. We know this. The data tells us that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. Projects are losing time during commissioning and they're missing deadlines at the end of projects. But why is this? Why are projects struggling with commissioning? We need to address these problems before I can teach you what to do. There are two common mistakes that take place on projects, and by just fixing these two mistakes, projects can see huge improvements. So what are these two mistakes? Mistake number one is leaving commissioning to the end of projects. We've been told for many decades that commissioning takes place at the end of projects. We need to get everything built and installed during construction, and then we're going to test everything at the end and make sure it all works. But this is actually not true. This is, of course, what most projects do is they roll the dice at the end, and maybe you've had this experience, but this is what leads to problems on projects. In fact, to be successful, the commissioning process starts right at the beginning during your feed processes. And we need to be implementing our commissioning software during feed to manage our commissioning processes starting early in projects if we want everything to come together successfully at the end of the project. When commissioning is left to the end, there's no way to be proactive. All the problems from earlier phases of the project are left to the end, and there's no time to recover. The damage is done before on-site commissioning even begins. So Nicholas has a comment. I've been part of both success and failure on the push. You are right. Yeah. The projects that are doing this and implementing these tools and processes are probably the ones that have had success, and the ones that are leaving everything to the end in a disaster are probably the ones that are failure. It's easy to see which ones will be a successful and which ones won't. So I'm glad you've had some positive experiences on projects because there are projects that are well done that do go well, that are just an absolute pleasure and joy to work on. But then there's the projects that are a nightmare that you wish you'd never even seen it, right? So when we talk about getting our system set up earlier and not leaving commissioning to the end of projects, it's exactly what Stephen Covey says in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. His habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. And we must be doing this on capital projects. We must be implementing commissioning project management processes right from the start. You must have a clear vision of how your project objectives are going to finish right from the beginning of the start of your project. You must have a clear picture of how your project is going to end during commissioning. which means you must have visibility and clarity on how to complete your projects during commissioning and startup, especially when you're working with large project teams. There's just no way to be successful and complete projects unless you have clear objectives at the beginning. And it's more than just cost, schedule, and date. You need to have the clear technical, commercial, and project management picture of how the project is going to finish during commissioning if you want to achieve those cost, schedule, and date and budget objectives. It's like that for everything. Projects are no different. You need to know where you're going before you go on the destination, or you're never going to get to where you want. Imagine getting on a plane without knowing where you're going. You go to the airport and you just pick a random gate and see where you end up. You're, of course, not going to get to where you want with this approach. You need to know your destination before you start. And this applies to capital projects for sure, is to know what success looks like during commissioning before you're getting too far into the project. At the highest level, your project objectives are to deliver high quality systems on time and on budget. The only way to meet these project objectives is to achieve successful commissioning and startup. Therefore, everything you do on projects, all design and all construction activities, they must be done with the clear objective to successfully complete commissioning and startup. Mr. LaBelle talks about this in his book as the pull system, planning projects from right to left, working backwards from your in-service date, figuring out commissioning, then figuring out construction, then figuring out design. Unlike construction, though, in a manufacturing assembly line, the guy at the end of the line dictates when he needs things, and we need to be taking this same approach on projects, where commissioning, who is the guy at the end of the manufacturing line, right? He dictates what they need and when they need it to properly finish the job. This is the only way projects are successful, when there is a clear definition of what success looks like during commissioning. And this is why it's critical to implement structured commissioning project management processes early in projects, so that objectives are clearly defined for everyone to see and understand how their role contributes to successful commissioning and startup. When projects do not start with the end in mind, they quickly meander off path with no clear direction on how to get to the end. So mistake number 2, many projects are still using paper and spreadsheets, and they've got their paper sign-offs or they've got their custom spreadsheets to manually track everything. And while this used to work 20 years ago, projects are far too complex. We're in the information age, and there are just too many documents and too much information. It's impossible to keep track of manually. We need real-time data to make informed decisions, and we can't wait until Friday's spreadsheet update to get the information that we need. We need access to information now. If we're working on something on a Tuesday, the work that's taking place in the morning, we need to know by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, did that actually get done? Because we're resetting and replanning what's going to take on Wednesday. We can't wait for the weekly update on the spreadsheet to figure out what's going on. Successful project teams are no longer using paper and spreadsheets, and I'll show you what they're using. When projects use paper and spreadsheets, it's just not an efficient way to complete projects. Maybe you can track some things with brute force, but your spreadsheets don't give that clear picture that's needed on what's required for commissioning, and I'll show you what's missing. It's super difficult to complete a project when everyone has a different idea of what success looks like during commissioning. And during commissioning, the details really start to matter when everything needs to start coming together, right? With no clear view of commissioning, project teams spend more time in meetings talking about the work rather than actually getting the work done in the field. And I think you can all agree, we don't need more meetings. We need a better way to organize our teams so we can actually do the work. When projects make one or more of these 2 common mistakes, when they're leaving commissioning to the end, or they're still using paper and spreadsheets to manage commissioning, we call this cowboy commissioning. When projects suffer from cowboy commissioning, the work is inefficient, you miss your deadlines, everything is a last-minute scramble, project teams are unclear on how to finish projects during commissioning, and it's the reason projects end in commissioning chaos. So check in with the chat. Any questions so far? Is this making sense? Some of the people that have left comments there, what's your experience been with Cowboy commissioning? Has your projects ended successfully, or are you more familiar with Cowboy commissioning and the chaos at the end? Shoot a note in the chat there. Let me know your experience. All right. Let's start with the processes that are required for commissioning. And after this, then we'll go through what are the software tools that are required to manage commissioning. There are three frameworks required for commissioning project management. There are our planning frameworks that are required, our construction completion frameworks that are required, and our on-site commissioning and startup frameworks, of course, to complete our on-site testing. These make up the integrated completions process. And when you establish integrated completion processes earlier in your projects, everyone starts with the end in mind, with a clear picture of what success looks like during commissioning. You reduce the risk on your projects by addressing issues earlier so that not all the risks are deferred to the end of your project, and you eliminate the chaos of cowboy commissioning, saving your projects millions of dollars and months of schedule. And most importantly, we're able to deliver high quality systems that can be used for decades of reliable operation. However, when you're not following integrated completion processes, it may seem like you're making progress on your projects, of course, until on-site testing starts, right? And then nothing works and things are missing and there's constant delays. You're losing time during commissioning and it's a scramble to get things finished at the end. You're faced with costly delays and your project ends up in cowboy commissioning. So Nicholas says, this is good. We use electronic, but it's not per se in a group system. It's made up of branches such as Q&A, construction, safety, and by trade. Yep. So some of the systems we'll look at here shortly help pull that all together in a cohesive system and implementation to finish projects. I'll show you what that looks like. Without integrated completion processes on projects, well, what do most project teams try to do? They spend all their time, of course, focused on design and focused on construction, and that's where most of the money is spent. So that's the phases of projects that get all the attention, but they forget about commissioning. They dump all the earlier design and construction problems on the commissioning guys at the end, right? Hoping they'll figure it out. But all this does is defer all your risk to the end of your projects. And this is, of course, what most projects do. I guess the approach is just fingers crossed and hoping things will work in the end and that the commissioning guys will get to site and sort it out. But what really happens is the blame game starts and finger pointing begins of what went wrong earlier. And all your commissioning guys can do is point out the mistakes you made earlier in your project. Your claims start to pile up. And I guess the plan is to fight it out in court years after the project, right? But this is hardly a good approach to projects, even though this is what a lot of project teams do. There is a better way when you start your projects with the end in mind by implementing integrated completion processes much earlier in your projects. So before we go through this chart on the screen here, why is it called integrated completions process? Well, that's because commissioning project management must be integrated into all early stages of projects. We must have commissioning integrated into our procurement processes so that we're not only using contracts to get the job started, but we're also using them as tools to get the job finished when the right things are defined up front on what success looks like for commissioning. We need to have commissioning involved in our design processes to bring those lessons learned from the end of projects back to the beginning of projects when design packages are being prepared to help earlier groups understand what's required for later in projects. We need to have commissioning involved in our construction processes to help construction groups understand the sequence and the details of what's required for commissioning. And we need to have commissioning involved in our construction completion processes so that we're actually getting to construction complete and have everything that we need, both physical assets and documentation, to make sure everything is available for what's needed for commissioning. It's the only way to have the guy at the end of the line, the commissioning guys, guiding earlier groups for what's required for commissioning success. So let's go through each framework on the screen here so that we can see how to make this happen on our projects. So the first phase here of our integrated completions process is our planning frameworks. And there's 10 parts to this initial planning framework. We'll go through each one here quickly. You may be familiar with a lot of these, or if you're new to commissioning, some of these may be new to you. So I'll go through them here quickly and feel free to ask any questions as we go through it. So the first item here is our contracts. And we need to have commissioning involved in putting together contracts for our engineering design contracts and our installation and construction contracts, because typically when you look at contracts, they're pretty light on details for commissioning, right? Contracts are awarded for design and contracts are awarded for construction, and they may have some of the technical requirements for commissioning, but they're usually pretty absent on all of the commercial or project management requirements for commissioning that define what's required for completion processes, what's required for static completion, what's required for the sequence of how construction is completed. And when these items are missing in contracts, then good luck trying to sort that out after contracts are awarded. You don't have a chance, right? Because the ink's already on the paper and it's already agreed to. And if you want to make those changes after contracts award, of course, there's a cost to do that, right? So we need to make sure that the rules of the game in contracts are defined up front in how the project is going to finish during commissioning. And it's very, very possible. Everybody would say, well, we don't have enough technical details, but it's not the technical details we're necessarily looking for. It's the workflows, the project management aspects in how the project is going to be completed. That all needs to be defined in contract, so everybody has a crystal clear picture of how the project is going to be finished, to have that to be able to start with the end in mind. Another important aspect in contracts is our equipment procurement contracts. Often equipment is ordered and it's pretty light on details of what needs to be tested in the factory. We'd be familiar with some of the typical test requirements for common equipment like a pump, but when it gets to more complex items such as our control and protection systems, we need to be defining how these are going to be tested in the factory before they're shipped to site, because without the requirements in those contracts, there of course will be a big push to get that stuff out the factory and get it to site so it can be installed. But if it's not properly tested before it leaves site, both hardware and software integrated testing, then the hardware cubicle itself is useless when it shows up to site, and it's not going to work. We need to make sure what we're getting to site actually meets the project needs before rushing to get it out of there. And that can only be done if it's defined in contracts. So the next aspect is our feed processes. A lot of projects, you've probably been involved in some of the lessons learned activities that take place on projects. Well, this is the process to actually get those lessons learned fed back into projects. The lessons learned you've done were probably really well and documented, but then quickly forgotten about, filed away, and never properly implemented on the next project. This is where that process takes place, is during our preliminary design reviews and detailed design reviews. There's critical aspects that the commissioning team needs to provide feedback, and the operations team needs to provide feedback to make sure that design packages are being created in a way that aligns with what's required for the end of the project. The industry is coming around to have constructability reviews and have construction input to our design processes, but commissioning and operations also need that same opportunity to guide some of the earlier processes and projects to make sure that we get what we need at the end. And there may even be some more detailed, more in-depth design reviews when it comes to our process control narratives or HMI screen displays. When these things are being designed and prepared earlier in the project, we need to have commissioning and operations input to make sure that those functions are being designed correctly, that we get what we need later during commissioning and operations from these earlier processes and projects. The next one is our FAT and IFAT processes. I briefly mentioned this, but factory acceptance testing, I'm sure you're very familiar with a lot of the typical testing that would be required for a pump, and run it for a few hours and measure 3 points on the pump curve. That's all good. We've been doing that for decades. Not too much of an issue there. But when it comes to more complex systems like our control and protection cubicles, we need to be making sure that both the hardware and the software are tested in the factory before that equipment ships to site. Some of these complex systems they're useless without the software. Everything's integrated, everything's digitized, and your PLC logic code is a fundamental element of these complex systems. Having only the hardware verified in the factory isn't very effective when there's no software to actually make it do what it needs to do. So we need to be making sure that we're performing proper integrated factory acceptance testing on these more complex systems so that when they arrive to site, we have confidence that these are actually going to work, that we can actually use these for commissioning and not have to go back and be developing software and doing debugging, because that's not commissioning. That's software development, and that's testing that these systems actually work. And that a lot of that needs to be done up front so that we don't get bogged down with that later in projects. I am going to share a case study with you after this presentation on 2 approaches to integrated factory acceptance and how that turned out for one project versus the other. You can check that out. Next planning element is our project systematization. So this is one of the main reasons to have our commissioning guys involved in projects much earlier, because we need to be taking a systems-based approach through all stages of projects. And that can only be done when through a certain stage of design, we can take all of our equipment tag lists and start grouping these into subsystems and systems. This helps align design groups with construction groups with commissioning groups, because ultimately everything has to align at the end for our startup sequence. There's only one startup sequence. There's always a technical dependency of you need this system before this system before this system. And our startup sequence defines our sequence of commissioning, our sequence of construction, and our sequence of design. That's one of the main reasons to have our project systematization done earlier, is to give all groups working on the project that system-based approach and how this is all going to come together at the end of our project during our startup. So we need to be defining our gated commissioning workflows. This is the next element of our planning functions here. Our gated commissioning workflows define how each subsystem or system is going to flow through our workflows when it comes with regards to the staged gate approach that's required for static completions to get to pre-commissioning, commissioning, startup, and hand over to the owner. So our gated commissioning workflows need to be defined specifically to our projects, and each project would do this slightly different. So it needs to be defined specifically for how you do your work and how you do your commissioning, to define what are the staged gates, what sign-offs are going to be required, who has authority to make sure that each gate is complete before moving to the next one. And then this all gets documented and moves into our next piece here, which is our CMS software. So once we've defined our gated commissioning workflows, then this all gets modeled in our CMS software so that everybody has visibility on the systems and subsystems that are required, how they flow through our gated commissioning workflows, and everyone gets that visibility in the software of what's required and when it's required. So it's crystal clear on each stage gate is what's required from a physical asset perspective, what's required from a documentation perspective, and nothing gets missed when it's all tracked in software. These software systems are quite powerful. I'll show you some of them here shortly on how they're used on projects, and hopefully you can check them out. So as we get through a lot of our planning elements, we'll then be able to define our commissioning sequence and our commissioning schedule, and how this all comes together in our gated commissioning workflows and what that sequence is for each specific subsystem. And then looking at dates and durations, we can form our commissioning schedule. Our sequence and schedule, again, all gets loaded into our CMS software. So it's all laid out what needs to take place and when it needs to take place on projects, with the flexibility, of course. There's always things that are going to come up or unexpected issues, no problem. But at least we've got a sequence that we can go through and deal with those problems as they arrive. Next item is our forms and certificates. And you may have used forms and certificates on a lot of your projects, but when I talk about forms and certificates, these are no longer paper forms or paper certificates that are used on projects. These are the forms or the sign-offs that exist within your CMS software at each gated process through your commissioning workflows. So what are the forms that are required? Who's going to be responsible to sign those off? And how are those used in our CMS software? Super important to define in advance. We've all been using checklists and procedures for many decades now. All of our checklists and all of our procedures, we still need to go through the effort of creating those, but these aren't paper any longer. These are loaded within our CMS software, and these are all digitally tracked checklists. They look very similar to what you would see on your paper spreadsheets, but now they're all within the software, and you can verify all the information. Data is being recorded right into the software. All your pass-fail criteria is in there, and everything's tracked and managed within the software so that nothing gets missed. It significantly helps with your commissioning workflows to improve productivity. And then the last item here, not because it's the least important, but of course, is safety. We need to be defining our commissioning safety processes in advance, because the commissioning team is relied on heavily from a safety standpoint to make sure that all of these startups are taking place safely and that everybody is conducting the work as safe as possible. So we need to be defining our PSSR processes, our test readiness review functions, working closely with our HSC groups to make sure that the right processes are in place, emergency response plans are in place, so that if anything should go wrong during energization or startup of equipment for the first time, we're prepared to deal with those items in the event that they occur. We do everything we can in advance with our safety process to make sure that's not the case, but we can always expect there may be equipment failures or unexpected upsets that we have to be prepared for. So those are the planning elements. The next group here is our construction completions elements, and there's two frameworks that are required here. I'm sure you've been familiar with punch list walkdowns and categorization of punch items, A, B, C, but this is formalizing that process within the software to have joint walkdowns conducted between construction and commissioning groups and make sure that these are being logged and tracked within the software, and then categorizing each of these punch items, type A, type B, type C. When they're tracked in software, nothing gets missed. Everything is identified as the categorization, if it's an ABC, specifically who's responsible to deal with that punch. And the beauty is, even in addition to ABC, the specific timing of when that item needs to be complete within our gated commissioning workflows. So it significantly simplifies all of the punch list walk down and tracking information, because nothing gets missed in software. All the big items, all the small items, everything's tracked and everybody has clear visibility on what's required. So then the second item of our construction completions is our subsystem static completion. And this is often a challenge on projects because everybody's definition of done seems to mean something different, right? The commissioning guy's definition of done means something different from the construction guy's definition of done, means something different from the design guy's definition of done. And everybody will think they're done, not with ill intentions, but that's just their understanding of what they think done means for their particular scope of work, right? But that doesn't always align. And when things get out of line, that's when things are missing. So when we define this crystal clear in software of what each subsystem static completion means, what each specific tag is required, all of the physical assets, all of the documentation assets, everything that's required, everybody has crystal clear visibility on what each stage gate means, what's required for it, and what is their role to achieve each of those stage gates. And when you do this, when you clearly systematize your project and you clearly define each static completion for each subsystem and system, this all gets much more clear for everybody in the software to keep track of each completion and define the goalposts that are required to get through each of the stage gate processes. So gives everybody the visibility on what's required, and it ensures that nothing gets missed as we go through our stage gate process. Okay, so then the last item here is our on-site commissioning and startup, and you're probably familiar with a lot of these. There's 6 frameworks that exist in here. So these would be our functions for pre-commissioning, moving into commissioning. There's always a question of, well, what takes place during pre-commissioning and what takes place during commissioning. You can think of pre-commissioning as the equipment level testing the pump by itself on its own. Moving into commissioning is when we then expect the subsystem or system or group of items to be working together to function together as a subsystem. So that's kind of the distinction. There's no hard and fast rules, and it doesn't really matter, because when you define it properly in your software, everybody knows, okay, this is equipment level testing. It's taking place during this stage. Once we get through that stage gate, okay, well, this is system testing. Now that we've got our subsystem static completion, we can move into testing these items as a subsystem. So that's the general rule of thumb there, but there's no hard and fast rule. But that gets us to then moving into our startup functions. So first, energization of main circuit elements, introducing process fluids for the first time on mechanical systems. As our functions have come together, as our subsystems have formed systems and are ready for startup, that's the process there. Then we can move into our performance verification to optimize functionality of the system and make sure everything is meeting contract requirements. Your contracts may have a trial operation period where systems are expected to work for 3 days or a week or 30 days or whatever's defined in your contract. We need to get ready for that to make sure that we can get through that period of time successfully and have no unintended interrupt of the system so that we can get to handover of our systems at the end of the project. So you can see there's quite a bit involved for commissioning to be successful, and your spreadsheets just can't do all of this. If you're still using spreadsheets, it means one of two things. It means either you're doing all of this by brute force, or it means you're not doing some or you're not doing all of these functions on your projects. And neither of these situations is good because it's not good for you and your team. You're burning out a lot of good people if you're still trying to do all this stuff by brute force, and it's driving a lot of people away from the industry, and it's not good for your projects because you're leaving all of the risk to the end of your projects. And when that happens, we know how that turns out, right? We know that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget if you're trying to brute force a lot of this stuff. So now let's look at the software tools that are required to manage what we just went through there. When you use commissioning software on your projects, you can get rid of the brute force that's required to manually track everything in spreadsheets. Everyone on your project has clarity on what's required for commissioning, and you're able to complete commissioning much more efficiently, which of course saves time and money on projects, right? However, when commissioning software is not implemented correctly, or worse, you're still using paper and spreadsheets, you're missing all of what's required to complete projects that we just went through. It's a scramble at the end to figure it all out. And it's the reason that 9 to 10 projects are late and over budget, because they didn't start with the end in mind. So what do project teams try to do without commissioning software? Well, they try to manually track everything in Excel, right? They have their all singing, all dancing Excel macros that they've perfected over many years. And they have a few people that are manually updating these each day, and everyone's confused about what's required for commissioning. Things get missed and nothing works in the end. And another thing, your spreadsheets are never going to attract young workers to the industry. The new generation that's coming to the industry, they're demanding much better ways to get their job done, right? They all have an app on their phone and they're expecting more sophisticated methods than your spreadsheets. They're not interested in banging their heads against the wall with your outdated spreadsheets. They're looking for more advanced ways to do the work because they know these systems exist, and projects that aren't using these systems, the younger generation is just going down the street to the next guy that is. So we need to be implementing these systems just to be able to get the right people on our projects, because there is a huge labor shortage and skilled labor to work on projects. This is a feature, an item that is required on projects to help people want to work on our projects and get these things done. The only way to stay relevant and increase project productivity is to take advantage of the more sophisticated software tools that are available so that we can complete commissioning as efficiently as possible. Now, there's been a lot of discussion in the media on some of these AI tools and functions that we know are coming. Is that 6 months or 6 years? Hard to say, but we know they're coming. And with these advanced systems that are coming, are you really going to be the last one using Excel in 5 years from now? The systems are here and they're ready to be used now, and they're only going to get better in the future. That we need to be leveraging the power of these tools on our projects. And when you get the best software tools set up on your project, you can make this transition as easy as possible by getting rid of your spreadsheets and getting the software system set up so that you can start using some of these more advanced workflows. Now, we do know that a lot of project people are busy. I don't know anybody working on projects that's sitting around looking for things to do. So you don't have time to figure this out. And this is what we help with, is to get project teams set up with the best software tools on their projects so they can take advantage of some of these systems that exist. There are actually over 25 different software systems that exist. That's what's on the screen here. And we've reviewed each one of these. We know which ones are good. We know which ones are better than others and which ones to stay away from. So we don't actually sell software. We've never developed software, and we don't intend to develop software because there are some really good software vendors on the market that have done a great job in defining how we manage our commissioning workflows in projects. So instead, what we've done is we've partnered with the best software companies for each industry. So for power systems, if that's renewables or wind or solar or any type of power project, we know the best software to use. There's a couple of good options for oil and gas. If you're working on data centers, there's excellent systems that we can take advantage of here to help us with our commissioning workflows. For mining, chemical manufacturing, for EV batteries is huge these days. Hospitals, airports all over the world, pharmaceutical, semiconductor, every major city's got a water treatment plant. There's lots of projects everywhere, and there's good software to use for each of these industries. The list that's on the screen, if you don't already have a copy of it and you'd like to get a copy of this list, you can go to learncsu.com. And at the bottom of that page, there's a link. You can download this PDF. You can see the 25 different software options that exist there. So go to learncsu.com and download this list. Check it out. So the software tools are certainly a big piece of the equation for managing our commissioning workflows. They're just not the biggest piece. Completing projects during commissioning is not fundamentally about software. And I don't want you to think you can just get one of these software tools, get one of these software systems and start setting it up, and then it's going to solve everything on your project. All of these programs are extremely flexible to match your project specific workflows. So what that means is that out of the box, they're a blank canvas that needs to be configured with how you do your work. We know that commissioning is complex, so naturally the software is going to be complex as well, right? I just don't want you to feel like you're sitting in the cockpit of a 737 trying to get your commissioning software to do what you need it to do. This is why we help project teams get this set up on their projects so that they can get set up with the best software systems to help them actually manage their work. You don't have time to research software. You're busy. You don't have time to sit through several software demos with each of these vendors and try and pick the best one. And you don't have time to fiddle around with getting it set up. And you especially don't have time to develop the training and onboarding that's going to be required to get your team to actually start using this software. It's why a lot of projects are stuck using paper and spreadsheets, right? Because it's easier just to continue with what you know rather than try and take that on your own and make this transition. You don't want to take on additional work and find a better way. And it's why project teams get stuck with status quo, because that's just the way it's always been done, right? And the thing about these software systems is if you have great commissioning processes, you'll absolutely love them. But if you don't have great processes, you'll hate them. And most project teams are not super process driven, which is why we see a lot of projects struggle with their new software and complain about their software and hate it, is because it was never implemented properly in the first place. We certainly don't want to take a bad commissioning process and digitize it. And I don't want you to fall into this trap that we see a lot of projects get stuck in. We make the transition to digital systems super easy for you so you can stay focused on getting your projects done and not have to feel like you're stuck in this cockpit trying to figure out what to do. Okay, so these are the two common mistakes that are made on projects. Project teams often leave commissioning to the end of projects, and they're often still using paper and spreadsheets to manage their commissioning workflows. And these are the two main reasons why projects are struggling with commissioning. And if you fix just these two things, you'll already have made huge improvements on your projects. So I briefly did mention this case study. I'm not going to go through it right now. It's a comparison of two power projects that took place roughly at the same time here in Canada, and their different approach to commissioning with regards to integrated factory acceptance testing. So I'll send you the link to this case study. It's just a short little video. Watch your email. You can check out the case study and look at the comparison between the two projects. Hopefully you can apply these lessons learned on your projects so that they don't end in disaster like one of these projects did. So watch for that email. I'll send it to you afterwards. So we've covered a lot of good information today. We've talked about the commissioning processes to follow, and we've talked about the software tools that are required to manage your commissioning. So let me know in the chat. Can you get these commissioning processes set up in your projects? Can you start selecting software and getting that your teams to start using it on your projects? Can you get these processes set up and workflows within the software so that we can use these tools to help you better manage your commissioning? What's the first step you'll take on Monday to get these two items, the processes and software, set up on your projects to take advantage of some of these tools? What I've given you today are the commissioning tools and processes that successful project teams are using to complete commissioning as efficiently as possible. What I've given you are the commissioning tools and processes if you want to avoid making costly mistakes on your projects. You want to avoid missing steps of the commissioning process. What I've given you is what's required to avoid using outdated paper and spreadsheet processes and advance to more sophisticated ways to manage the work, and how to avoid the scramble at the end of projects. Of course, this is what we all want. We want to complete commissioning as efficiently as possible. We want to follow industry best practices for commissioning. We want to be able to use the best software systems for our projects and take advantage of these new technologies that exist. And we want to be able to make a real impact on projects to deliver projects on time and on budget with high quality systems that can be used for decades of operation. So the way I see it, I guess you have two choices. You can continue with Cowboy commissioning if that's what you've been doing on projects, and you can continue using your paper and spreadsheets. You can just, and some people will just outright refuse to adapt to commissioning software. I still remember my last friend that refused to give up his BlackBerry, and he was using it right till the last day before they shut off the network and it wouldn't even work anymore. There's always people that just outright refuse to keep up with the times, right? You can spend the next several years trying to figure this stuff out on your own, and this is a totally legitimate way to go. This is what I did, as I've worked in this industry for more than 10 years, working on several projects, seeing what works and what doesn't, and figuring out how this stuff all works together. And you can certainly do the same. You can spend 10 years trying to figure this stuff out as well. You can continue with the way it's always been done, even though the way it's always been done has never really worked, has it? The way it's always been done results in 9 out of 10 projects being late and over budget. And it doesn't make any sense. So I'm always amazed by some of the dinosaurs in this industry that just insist on doing things the exact same way they've been done for the last 30 years. I guess they don't want to let go of those glorious electromechanical relay days that they were part of, right? And they just refuse to adapt. And I certainly don't want you to fall into this trap as well. And you can develop the training on your own to onboard your teams and get them familiar with these new systems. And you can hope that they adopt some of these new systems, and maybe they will. Or we see a lot of project teams that hate it. They try and roll this out and it's not rolled out well, and project teams just refuse to use it. It's not working. And they quickly return to their paper and spreadsheet processes pretty quickly that they know and they're comfortable with. And it's just another failed process improvement. And I don't want you to fall into that trap either. The other option is you can get the best commissioning systems for your projects right now. You can get access to the industry best commissioning processes. You can be able to start using the best commissioning software for your projects. You can get your team trained and using the new systems right away. And all of this while you stay focused on getting your projects done, because we know you're busy on projects. You don't have time to try and get this done, right? You may realize you need to do these upgrades and get these systems on your projects, but how are you going to get that done when you got a project to complete? It's not set up well for success, right? You need help to be able to do this. So if option number 2 sounds like the better approach, we've got 2 different options that we have to help you and your projects get this done. The first option is with our commissioning consulting services, where we make this super easy for you, and we get the best software system set up for you that meets your project specific needs. The second way that we can help you as well is with our certificate program, where you can apply to join our Commissioning Academy program so that you can learn this stuff on your own, and you'll have all the tools you need to set your projects up for success and to get your certificate in commissioning project management. It's super simple. All you have to do is go to learncsu.com and click on one of the purple buttons that applies to you, submit your information, and we'll take it from there. So Our first option is great for companies that want to make this as easy as possible for themselves, right? To save time and get a proven process to get software systems set up on your projects and to get your team trained to actually understand how to use these systems and want to use them because they see the benefit in how it helps them complete their work. We know people working on projects are busy, so this option is perfect if you need someone to get this done for you on your projects. Our consulting services at Turner Capital Projects are exactly what you need. If you've already got checklists, then we'll take your existing checklist and we can digitize all of those for you. Or if you're just starting from scratch and you need some of these checklists developed, well, we can create those and we can get all of that set up digitally in software for you. All of this so you have a fully functional digital system ready to use on your projects. We then train your entire team, specific training for specific each role. It's short, to the point, tells people exactly what they need to do to use these systems so there's no confusion. It's crystal clear so that you can be as efficient as possible to complete your projects. Now, you probably know that you can't keep using your spreadsheets forever, and you know that you'll have to adapt to better systems. Now's the time to do that. With our help, you literally get to wave a magic wand and make this all happen for you so you can stay focused on your projects and not have to spend time trying to figure this all out for yourself, right? The technologies of the future are coming, whether the construction industry is ready or not. So go to learncsu.com, tell us a bit about your projects, and then select a time to meet where we can discuss how we can help you and your project succeed to get this done. Our second option is great for individuals that want to learn how to do this on their own, to understand the commissioning processes to follow and the software tools to use so you can get your certificate in commissioning project management. If you want to learn how to do this on your own, then our certificate program at Commissioning Academy is exactly what you need. There is an application process since we don't accept everyone into the program. So when you submit your application and if you qualify to join, you get everything you need to learn about the program, including all the details about the course content, the format of the course durations. You'll also get all of the pricing options that are available that you can see and review and make an informed decision. So I see the question there. I'm interested in looking further into the costs involved. Yep. So for our certificate program, if you submit your information and qualify, you'll be able to get all the information that's required in there for the certificate program. If you want to get information on our consulting services to get this all set up and get some guided support, then by all means, click on the consulting button there. You'll be able to book a time. We can look at your project-specific needs and discuss how this is rolled out and all the costs that are associated, of course. So either way, pick the option that's best for you, and you'll get the information you need so you can check it out. Nicholas, excellent. Do you think we could then approach oil companies' projects to get their commissioning tracking if we had these tools? Absolutely. The commissioning, or the oil and gas industry, because of the obvious safety hazards and offshore logistics challenges, is one of the leaders in addressing some of these items. And a lot of these systems have come from the oil and gas industry and are being used by a lot of the oil and gas projects. However, we still see oil and gas, others that aren't and haven't gotten that sophisticated, but the oil and gas industry is a little bit further ahead of some of industries in adapting these systems and using them. And it's essential required for any hazardous operation, which commissioning definitely is, right? So oil and gas is a perfect fit. The other ones I mentioned, power systems are a good fit. Solar, wind, all of these electrification projects that are coming up, all of them need to be using these systems to commission our projects. And definitely hope that answers your question, Nicholas. So our certificate program, when you complete the program, you pass the final exam, you get your certificate in commissioning project management. So that shows you exactly how this all works for the processes that are required, how the software is applied on your projects. And when you get your certificate, it shows others that you've completed the program and understand these processes, understand these software tools that are required to manage capital project commissioning. It shows you how to get away from your paper and spreadsheets to use some of these more advanced systems. So here's how this works. Go to learncsu.com and there's two big purple buttons. The button on the left is for companies that are interested in consulting services to get help, to get support, to get these software systems set up on your projects to manage your commissioning workflows. And the button on the right, this is for individuals that want to learn this on their own so they can understand the processes and software tools that are required for commissioning. And when you select our certificate program, then when you complete the course, you get your certificate in commissioning project management. We've tried to make this as super simple as possible because commissioning is a complex topic. And both of these options make it super simple for organizations to get the consulting support they need to get these systems on their projects, and for individuals to get a certificate so they can help understand the processes and software systems that are required. So go to learncsu.com, pick the option that's right for you, and we'll chat soon. Both of these options are the most comprehensive support for commissioning ever created, whether you want help figuring this stuff out or you want to learn this stuff out on your own. Now, maybe there's something else out there, but I've never been able to find it. I've looked everywhere in all industries on how are people expected to figure this stuff out. There's just no resource that exists. There's definitely a gap in the industry with regards to commissioning and how commissioning workflows are to be managed. And this is why we created this for you, to give you the support you need to set your project commissioning up for success and to give you the skills you need to work on the biggest and best projects in the world. So go to learncsu.com and you can get started right away. You can also go to our homepage and read some of the success stories that people are having with our products and services. So go to commissioningandstartup.com. At the top, you can click on success stories and you can read all the amazing feedback we receive on a daily basis. People love our support and you can see what they're saying about working with us. So go to commissioningandstartup.com and read the success stories to see for yourself. There's a reason that people come to us for commissioning, because we know how to do it. We have certainty in what we're doing, and it's clear, concise, and it actually works. It produces results. And this is what I've noticed is you can literally change the entire trajectory of your project when you have a clear and concise way to finish it during commissioning with better systems for commissioning. And that's what we want to help you build. So if you're serious about commissioning on your projects, or you're at least pissed off and tired of projects being late and over budget, go to learncsu.com and click one of the big purple buttons to get started. Now, if you do have all of this figured out on your projects, and this is exactly what you're doing, you're using the best processes, and you have the best software tools set up already, then I encourage you, please keep up the good work, because we need more people like you that are helping projects to succeed. However, we know that a lot of project teams have not figured this out on their projects because 9 out of 10 projects are still late and over budget. These are the projects that we want to help. So you can end up on the good side of these statistics, and we can at least have more than 10% of projects succeeding. So save some time and go to learncsu.com and we'll get you set up with what you need for commissioning. Now, I just want to end this presentation with the closing paragraph from the book, Built to Fail. This is the final paragraph of the book. Between now and 2060, the world's population will double, and all those people are going to need structures where they can live, work, play, travel, and thrive as a species, from housing to office buildings to factories to entertainment complexes to the vital infrastructure that enables all of it. Just the amount of building floor space required will be equivalent to building an entire New York City every month for the next 40 years. But the construction industry is woefully underprepared for this. It's not even prepared now. The time for business as usual is rapidly closing. The pain of status quo in construction is going to increase exponentially as our capacity to develop and execute projects fails and falls short of expectations. While we can borrow techniques from manufacturing, tech, and other industries, that change will not come from elsewhere. It comes from us. We must lead the change. I promise that ultimately you will be rewarded for having the courage to try. I thought that was a good way that they ended the book, and I thought I'd share that with you. So hopefully you agree. So to conclude, we must be doing our part to ensure that commissioning is successful as we all face these global challenges together to complete capital projects. All right, so we finished basically right on time. I do have some extra time here for Q&A. So if there is some additional questions, shoot them in the chat and I'll make sure that we get them answered while you do that, while you add any other questions. There are some common questions I get at this point, and I'll just go through them here. So I often get asked, well, why do I need software for commissioning project management? Our spreadsheets have been working just fine for us, and maybe they have been. I'm sure they have been working just fine. You're obviously getting the work done. Your spreadsheets probably have worked well for you for many years, and I suspect your spreadsheets have worked well for you is because you also have good people that actually understand the commissioning process. Now, it's becoming harder and harder to find those good people on projects as our commissioning experts are retiring and leaving the industry. And we can't expect everyone to understand commissioning as these people are leaving the industry, right? It's not reasonable to expect everyone to be a commissioning expert on your projects. We need to help everyone on projects understand how their role contributes to a strong finish during commissioning. And spreadsheets just can't do that. Commissioning software gives everyone on your project team visibility and clarity on what's required to finish your projects during commissioning. And we must give everyone working on projects a clear picture of what success looks like during commissioning if we want everyone aligned on the project earlier to know how to finish projects on time and on budget during commissioning. So another question I often get is, why do I need commissioning project management? Isn't this all covered when you get your PMP? And when you look at the information that PMI puts out, it's pretty light on details on how to finish capital projects. PMI covers how to start a project, and it briefly covers quality management, but there is nothing on the processes or tools required for commissioning project management. The stuff we help people with just isn't included in getting your PMP. And I think this is why there's so much confusion about commissioning, is because finishing capital projects during commissioning just isn't taught to project managers. And when I try to explain this stuff to project managers, they're just not listening. They're not interested. Commissioning project management is the missing part of what's required to actually finish capital projects. So if you're planning to get your PMP, that's still a good thing to do, but what you're missing is how to finish projects. And if you're managing projects, isn't finishing them the most fundamental part of starting a project? So another question I get is, does this apply to all industries? Now, remember the distinction between technical commissioning and commissioning project management. All projects, of course, do technical commissioning differently. Every project has unique technical requirements. The breakers to close and the valves to open, they're always project specific. The technical commissioning aspects are always different. No two projects are the same, even within the same industry. However, the processes and tools for commissioning project management, this applies to all industries, regardless of the technical details. The same risk mitigating steps that we've discussed today need to be taken on all capital projects in all industries. It's always the same risk-based approach to manage commissioning so that your project-specific technical testing goes much better. So the commissioning project management principles we use, these apply to all complex projects, to all process systems, to any type of energy system, really all complex projects involving mechanical, electrical, and automation equipment that all needs to work together and come together as one system at the end of your project. So to answer the question, yes, these commissioning project management principles apply to all industries. And the last question I often get is, people ask if they can do this later. This all sounds good, but they're busy and they don't have time to do this right now, right? And I totally get it. Project's life is busy. When you say you're busy, I know you're legitimately busy. There's a lot going on. You're getting over 100 emails a day. And that's why we're here to help, because we know you're busy. You know you need to get this stuff on your projects, but there's no way it's going to happen unless you get some help. So submit your information and get the help you need so you can stay focused on your projects and know that you're getting what you need for commissioning to be successful, because nobody wants their projects to be 6 months late and millions of dollars over budget because they ignored commissioning until it was too late in the process. So Nicholas says, you're bang on. I have my PMP. It's light on commissioning management. Yeah. And you know what? I got my PMP 15 years ago and I was all gung ho. Awesome. I know how to manage projects, until I started managing projects and realized, holy shit, there's a little bit more to it on finishing projects. You get all your charters and your schedules and budgets all set up with all your PMP information, but there's nothing in there on how to finish projects. And I was just shocked and stunned as how can there be such a huge gap in the industry, which is what prompted me to need to put this together to fill that gap, because projects are just suffering without the knowledge and expertise to be able to do this to finish projects. Khaled's got his hand up, so shoot your question in the chat if we've got a minute here and I can get it answered. Let me know what you're looking for there. And I don't see any more questions coming in the chat unless you can get something in there quickly, Khaled. So if there is nothing more, then we can end it here. So go to learncsu.com. You can click on one of the big purple buttons that applies to you, submit your information, and we'll help you and your projects succeed with commissioning. We're here to help you with commissioning so that you can get the skills you need for your projects you want to work on, and so your projects can get the tools and processes they need for commissioning to be successful, so that we can all work on these global challenges that we face together to complete capital projects. What does a small company cost for the software and training certifications? Is it affordable for us little guys to see the value and opportunities for this? Talking to clients at the same time while you talk. There's always value. Yeah, people ask the cost of the software, the cost to get this set up, the cost for training and implementation. If you can do all of that and save 1 day of commissioning, that 1 day saved on commissioning usually covers the cost, because big projects, small projects, at the end of the project, a day of commissioning is extremely valuable. And anything you can do to save a day of commissioning is valuable to projects. Now, when you do all this properly, when you get software systems set up and when you get people managing these systems and people trained to use them, it's going to save you way more than a day. It's probably save you months. So it's when we look at that cost comparison, I'll say it's pretty easy to see the cost benefits in doing this. It's not easy for the people in your accounting department because they only see the single line item that says cost of software, cost of hiring an additional person if needed. There's no corresponding line item in the budget to say money saved due to doing this, right? But submit your information, book a call. We can walk through it. I'll show you the cost benefits of what it's costing you versus the cost to implement this, and see how much money you can save by doing this. When you explain that to the accountants, then they help to understand, oh, this is like a 9x savings on cost of investment. That's the piece that's missing that you need to show people to help them see it. So book a call and we can have a chat about it. Yep, Paul, glad to have you here. We can certainly be back in touch when you have some more time. So to conclude here, watch your email. I'm going to send out the link to this replay. Zoom takes maybe a couple hours to process it and spit it out. So once that's out, I'll email it to you. You can watch the replay again or send it to others that you think might need to understand or hear what this commissioning project management is all about. The more people that see and understand how to do this stuff, the more successful our projects will be. I'll also you'll also get a link so you can join our next webinar. I do this every Friday. Well, not next Friday, but in 2 weeks, we're taking a break next week. In 2 weeks from now, I'll do the same presentation again if you want to rejoin, or if you think it might be good for someone you know to attend, absolutely. They'll get the link too. Sayan, yeah, I've got your email address. I'll send the information. The email that you use to register for this webinar is the one that I'll use, so it may be different than that. I'm not sure. I'm also going to send you the link to the commissioning case study that we talked about. You can check that out. And I'll send you the link to the page that you see on the screen when you go to Learn CSU, learncsu.com. I'll send you that link as well to give you the direct link to access that so you can submit your information, and so that we can have a chat. You can get the support you need for commissioning, and we can help your projects be successful by getting you set up with all this stuff. So let's conclude it there. I want to thanks everyone for joining. Lots of great questions, lots of great discussion, and I do appreciate everyone for coming here. Oh, I do see one last question. And what would a charge out look like for offering these services? I have no idea other than my hourly charge outs for consultants. So I'm not entirely sure what you're looking for is to set this up for people on projects. That's the service that we provide. So when you get in touch with us, we'll be able to set your project up with all of these systems, all of these processes, and get everything in place. Um, if you're looking for a charge out rate for what you're doing, I'm not entirely sure what you're asking, but by all means, book a call. We can have a chat and we'll see how we can help you out. All right. Last call. Any questions? Anybody want to shoot anything in there before we go? Okay. So thanks for joining, everyone. I want to tell you to have a great day when you're working on your projects. Be safe, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.